Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I just left school and did what was obvious to me following leaving school. I have no particular qualifications at all. I just thought, one of the things I thought when I left school was that there would be a shortage of energy, or at least that it would be expensive, of fossil fuel energy in my lifetime. Well, if not in my lifetime, in my grandchildren's lifetime. And I thought we were, even then, nearly 50 years ago, using up our resources of fossil fuels far too quickly. And I studied it really on my own about the storage of energy, and realized how difficult the storage of energy is, except in fossil fuels, and the difficulties. One of my people that always was an inspiration to me was Charles Darwin. And one of the things about Charles Darwin that isn't often remembered is that his wife was an ardent Christian, and he wasn't allowed by her, didn't want to upset her, to say what he knew to be the case from his study of evolution, the Galapagos Islands and everything. And we have to be careful that established beliefs don't hinder us moving forward always. Because for me, what Darwin says really talks to business, it talks to economics, it talks to obviously science, and it's the foundation of my thinking, really. We all know the main quote from, or thing that Darwin said, which was that when there is sexual reproduction, there will be variations in the progeny of that sexual reproduction. Probably there will be a lot which are more or less standard. Some will be worse and a few will be better. The worst will die out, but the better will tend to thrive, and in that way you get improvements. And we can see through history that the man that knacked the flints best in Paleolithic times probably got the best girl, and gradually we moved forward. And then someone clever man invented metal, or observed probably, that when you melted certain stones that you got a metal coming out of them, and if you mixed them together it was much harder, and so you got the development of the Bronze Age and then the Iron Age. It's how it is the great diversity. What we must be so careful to do is to avoid conformity. Conformity is the great evil. The establishment is the great conformity. That's the educational establishment, it's the civil service, and it's the political establishment. So another very interesting thing that Darwin said, which is a great inspiration to me in particular, having been an academic failure, is that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And so in my career, I've tried to be adaptable to change, and occasionally you have to pull yourself up when you realise that you're not being very adaptable. And that means always questioning what you're doing. I was skiing with my grandchildren a couple of years ago, and we stopped at the top of a steep bit. One of them wasn't too keen, Charlie wasn't too keen on the steep bit, and he'd been following me, and the one thing I thought I could do fairly well, reasonably well for my age, was to ski. And he stopped and he said, "Grandpa, what are you good at?" So he obviously didn't think much of my skiing, which was the one thing that I thought I could do. But I think what probably he picked up on, and he's a very, very dyslexic and very intelligent lad, was that I didn't accept anything as certain. And there's far too much these days, acceptance of certain, of what's happened before. We need to question everything. So that really is is where Darwin leaves me. There is the other quote there, which about collaboration. We have to work together. So Darwin is a great inspiration. How do I move this? Is it plus or? Oh, it's here, is it? No, that's wrong. Well, I'm here. Right. Sorry, yes. Okay, so my company, some of these you don't know it, Foundation in the Minerals business, and we're still in the minerals business. That is a pit at Denham. It's actually reusing, it's a bit of recycling there. That plant was used to dig, oh sorry, I've gone too far. Let's get it. To dig that rowing course, that's the rowing course where they hold the Olympics. We dug that with 3 other companies cooperating with them. There were 3 big companies. It was dug by a company called Eton Aggregates, and we each marketed the gravel. When we did work with them, but they thought we would fail, these big companies. And when they had the Articles of Association, if any company got into difficulties, the other 3 could buy it. That was the basis we could proceed with the Eton rowing course. What happened, they thought that we were going to get into trouble and they were taking us over. However, by the time we finished the course, they'd all been taken over and we were still going. So when you see the Olympics next summer, you say, "I know the bloke that dug that," and the other fellas. But we went over to Brussels to have a presentation when we dug it, an award, the best gravel pit or something, the best restoration. And 4 of us went over, and the award was made. We stood there, we had our photographs taken, and I stood to one side. And this is how big companies are. It was just the most petty and deceitful thing you could ever imagine. When the picture appeared in the paper, I wasn't in it. I've been involved with that job since 1972, before any of them had, and I'd seen it all the way through. But I wasn't in it. And that's how the establishment work. They think that they are the great. Sorry, let me kill that. They are the great. They know everything. In fact, small companies do move things forward, as well as big ones. Of course, it's not the case that big companies don't ever do it. We all do it. It's hard if you're a small company. And that is, what I always say is, out of strength comes forth sweetness. Because we're a strong company, we're able to help the local community. That is the Thames Valley Adventure Playground at Taplow. I worked with local authority people to try and find a place for people with special needs, children with special needs, so that they could feel like ordinary children, get up in the trees and do what, as far as possible, what ordinary children can, so they can be promoted. And I was asked by this group to join them, and we looked at all the best places for the Thames Valley Adventure Playground for children with special needs. We took 2 years, and in the end, the people that we'd identified let us down and dropped out. And I said, "Look, I've got a bit of land. It may not be the best place. It's between a gravel pit and the Bath Road and right beside the railway line. But it's there. You can have it, peppercorn, for as long as you like. And I think you just got to do it. Sometimes you just got to do it. I think this whole thing is going to fail unless we do it. So we did it. We built the Thames Valley Adventure Playground. It now costs, we thought we would get them up. We thought two things. We thought that medical science would take us forward so that we wouldn't need to have children with special needs by now. In fact, we had more visits than we've ever had. It costs $300,000 a year, and it gives parents who unfortunately have children who need special attention a respite. The local authority doesn't, the charity does. Out of strength comes forth sweetness. When I'll just fast forward to the last slide, and then we come back. Right, just one too many. I hope that you've all read Passage to India by probably the greatest philosopher of the 20th century. There are problems with being an innovator. And at the end of A Passage to India, you'll recall Fielding and Aziz wanting to be friends, but unable to be friends. And it said, the earth itself, uttering within its 100 voices, no, not yet. And the sky chiming in, no, not there. And when you're an innovator, that's what you have all the time. It's not now, you're doing the wrong thing, you're mad to be doing this. And what do you have when you're an innovator? Well, first of all, your colleagues are doubtful about what you're doing. Inevitably they are. Your shareholders are doubtful about what you're doing. Your bank is totally hostile. Your suppliers of the very equipment you're going to buy can't quite understand what the hell you're on about. Although they're very keen to sell it to you, they won't guarantee that it'll work in the way that you want it to work. You don't have established customers. Or you may not, very likely you won't have. The regulators are used to it being done a different way or not at all. They don't actually want change. The establishment, the regulation establishment don't want change. Things go wrong. Inevitably, things go wrong. The market isn't stable. I will come back onto that with landfill gas, but when we started on the landfill gas business, the price of oil was $30 a barrel, and suddenly it dropped to $10 a barrel, and it made the whole thing totally unstable. When NITA came in 2000, 2001 was it, we actually had to pay to dispose of the electricity we generated. The market is definitely unstable. Actually, you know in your heart that the financial model that you have produced is speculative. You know it's not certain. While you're doing all this, someone might invent a better way of doing it while you're developing the process. You know that? You don't know what you don't know. In your established business, you know what you don't know, and you can work there. But actually, there are areas you have absolutely no idea about. You yourself know that it may not work out, technically or commercially. And if you're successful after all that, they go and tax you a lot. So, faced with all that, sorry, I'll go back. Despite all that, you've got to be strong enough to carry on and have the faith and take it forward, knowing that you may be risking your children's livelihoods, Maybe it's good for them if they don't have any livelihoods anyway. Anyway, you have to, and that is a lonely place to be, and it's not often remembered, recorded that. It's a really lonely place to be an innovator. Everybody, your best friends, are telling you you're mad. So, when I was 21, I think it was, or 20, I visited a gravel pit with some samples at Gerrard's Cross of gravel, and I saw some good old boys toasting their breakfast over in a half-round Nissen hut with a crack of concrete and flames coming out through the crack of concrete, and they toasted their sandwiches over it before they ate them. And I said, what's that? They said, it's coming from the landfill. The gas is coming from the landfill, we've lit it, we're toasting our sandwiches on it. And I remembered that, I just observed it. But it made me think, because I was interested in energy. And so eventually we developed a business, actually, first of all, trying to make a vehicle fuel because you couldn't sell electricity, which, as I said, failed when the price of oil went from $30 to $10 a barrel. It wasn't worth doing. We did run vehicles on gas. Successfully, although actually also unsuccessfully. We made mistakes too, one of them blew up. Well, the engine blew up, to be precise, no one was hurt. It was dual fuel, we used pilot ignition, and the pilot compression ignited the gas. We cleaned the gas, and we learned how to clean the gas, and fortunately, by one of those great strokes of fortune, at the moment that happened, they wanted to denationalize the electricity industry, so they passed the Energy Act, and it enabled us to sell electricity to the grid. And we bought some good old W.H. Allen second-hand engines for 50,000 quid, and we installed 1 megawatt at Gerrard's Cross, and made no money for 15 years doing it. But we sucked. My friends thought I was mad. You're going to suck the gas out of the landfill and put it in an engine? You've got to be mad. Anyway, we did that, and eventually we were successful. The establishment did us, though, on the first NOFO, non-fossil fuel obligation, which was a support for renewables. They asked us for consultation on the contract, so we gave them consultation on the contract. And when the contract came out, there were no changes in it. So when we bid under the contract, and we said, but you haven't taken any notice of our consultation. So they said, that was a conditional offer, you can't have the contract. And we didn't get the NOFO 2. And that was an absolute disaster. We were losing money. Other people got the NOFO. Fortunately, we got it the next year when we were bullied enough to take out our consultation. One of the consultations said that if the grid went off, we didn't get paid for electricity that we generated. And we said, well, is that right? Because it doesn't work the other way around, but they won't have it. And it still is like that to this day. So we developed a business. Eventually, we got rid of the W.H. Allens. We bought Clark's. We bought another company. And in 2001, when we borrowed a lot of money, they introduced NITA. They didn't introduce a follow-up for NOFO. And suddenly we had to pay to get rid of the electricity that we were generating from quite a lot of landfills. And our banks told us to shut it down. I had the confidence that it would come right. We turned the engines off, and it did come right. And in 2007, we sold the business, which we were told to shut down for nothing, and I think about 2002, we sold it for 80 million quid. That was simply having faith, carrying on, despite everybody's doubts, and despite the establishment trying to stop you, basically, doing anything new. So from the proceeds. There was no point in us carrying on in the business because there were going to be less landfills, quite clearly. We actually bought some forests in Scotland. That forest called Rimsdale. It's doesn't look very big. It's quite a long way up. That is 800 hectares. That further forest up there. Beside Rimsdale Loch in Sutherland. The trees that are sort of greyish are dead, and we won't be replanting that area. But that is now ready for harvesting, and our idea is to use it to make wood pellets, hopefully in a combined heat and power plant. So we generate electricity using wood, our wood and other people's wood, and we'll use the waste heat to provide the heat to make the wood pellets, which then can replace fossil fuels elsewhere. Unfortunately, the government haven't established what support we can get for making those pellets, and it's quite hard to make the financial model work. And much as I believe in it, you just can't go and invest good money that you've earned in projects which look like they simply won't make money. So until that is established, that support for renewables, which I say should be done as a tax over all renewables equally, all fossil fuels equally, but it isn't. It means that there are winners and losers, and we're a loser. Still, the trees are there, and we'll probably have to sell them to somebody else. But the idea remains, and maybe we will be able to make pellets. And we are the largest distributor of wood pellets in the country. We buy other people's, who have invested money and are losing absolutely colossal amounts of money on making the pellets, and we're buying it and distributing them, and we're losing a lot of money too. But we have the faith that we've got the best distribution system, and if it is taken up, then if wood pellets are taken up as a replacement for fossil fuels, then we will be in a position to cash in on that, and maybe we'll see what we do with that. One of my sons runs that business, and that's simply a binder stove which you can use to burn those pellets. I have not a binder one, but another make in my house. Works very well. Don't buy any oil or anything like that. Of course, electricity is made in very big power stations, and it's moved out the country in things like this, pylons, which I don't think look very pretty. But quite apart from that, of course, you lose money, you lose electricity in the transmission. And because the power stations are so big, working on fossil fuels or possibly nuclear, or windmills, but actually looking at the fossil fuel ones, you really can't use any material amount of the waste heat. Most power is generated at something like 40% energy efficiency. The other 60% is wasted. And it seemed to me a bit like when I saw the gas going to waste from the landfill. The principle of this is wrong. We should be using energy as efficiently as we can possibly do. And to my mind, there's another thing I'm not very keen on. I love walking in the mountains, and I don't particularly like coming across loads of windmills, wind turbines, but I don't object to a certain amount. I think if we get to depend on wind turbines too much, it's an unreliable source of energy. We have to keep spinning reserve going. It's good for a small percentage of our onshore or offshore, of our energy, of our electricity needs, but it shouldn't be too large a part, and it is getting to be too large a part. So one of the other things we did actually before we got our landfill gas was we moved into anaerobic digestion of waste, and that's a picture of our plant at Holsworthy in Devon. We hope to have some more plants. It had gone bust twice when we bought it in April 2005 because the people who were running it had been sort of invented by a consultant and been backed by European money, a lot of it, and the model, financial model and the business model were totally wrong. They didn't work, and it had gone bust twice. We bought it on the second occasion for £1.8 million. I think it had cost 10 million to build or something. And the original model was to bring cattle slurry in, 80% and 20% food waste. Unfortunately, there isn't much energy in cattle slurry, and big lorries running along Devon roads is not a great idea. Bringing stuff which has got hardly any energy in it. So we reduced the capacity of the plant in terms of cubic meters and increased it substantially in terms of electricity output, and we just use food waste. We're very successful at doing that. That's hopefully generating something like 4 megawatts of electricity now. It also provides, as you can see in the bags on the left-hand side there, we store digestate, which is a biofertilizer which we give to the local farms. As you can see, that's the area of Devon. When it was built, it was said to be going to heat the town of Holsworthy, which you can see in the distance. They were going to use a waste heat to do that, which was a totally absurd concept. So we stopped doing that. Instead, there is some of the product that gets digested. It's domestic waste, food waste, stuff like that. We store the gas now. We're planning to store the gas, and we've introduced an innovative system of getting rid of just depositing the electricity at the right, when the voltage is right down the line, and we've been able to increase the output down the line from 2.8 to 5 megawatts down the same line by being innovative on voltage control when the local voltage will enable us to do it. And we store the gas at night, which we can do, and then we will generate more electricity during the day when we can use, when the electricity is wanted in the local grid. So we're balancing the grid, we're balancing the voltage, controlling the voltage in the grid. I detected your question there. So we're actually going to be balancing the voltage in the grid. And also, we will be producing heat predominantly during the day. And you can see at the bottom there, the top is the plant, the digestion plant, the bottom is the drying plant. Now here's the nub of the whole thing, of what I got to say really. We generate 40% of the gas that is comes out of the digesters, gets used as, comes out as electricity. 60% goes into the air as heat. It's perfectly valuable and good energy. But unfortunately, when I do the sums, as I do many times in many different ways, on the drying plant, I just can't make it stack up as a financial viability, even though I'm going to give them the heat for nothing to do the drying, or give ourselves the heat for nothing to do the drying. It just can't make it stack up financially. Although this heat is going in the air and it's just being wasted. And I regard that as being highly unsatisfactory and something that could be replicated in many parts of the country and save a lot of fossil fuels. So this is in Maidenhead. The brown areas, one is First Black School, where I was a governor. The other is an ex-old gravel pit of ours at Spencer's Farm in the Green Belt. And we can't get consent there unless we are totally sustainable. So we want to build a new school, brand new school, state of the art, using existing playing fields and water from the gravel pits, so that we can give a really good education to the local community, and in particularly vocational education, but also further education to to people who've left school instead of going to university, or as well as going to university, they can carry on with their studies and build it so that that's easily done. We want to develop that, and I think we can get consent, but we've got to make it sustainable. How can we do it? To my mind, we should have an authorisation on the heat that we use at Holsworthy from a British standard authorising it, issuing a certificate, and then we can take that certificate to say we've saved fossil fuels drying at Holsworthy and make the electricity that we use in the site at Maidenhead green. And that would simply be trading, and that would mean that both sites, both projects could be done. A new school and a drying plant, both of them saving energy and moving forward. That's the other side. That's my country. I think we've become far too establishment bound. We need to do something about that. The civil service does not think. They go to university and stop thinking, to my mind. And the politicians are not strong enough to deal with the civil service. And the civil service, in any case, on the whole, the scientific civil service is gone. It's very hard to make scientific arguments, only political ones. So there we are, we're back to the trouble with innovation. Those are the problems. You have to have faith, and all the time the government is very ready to shoot you in the foot. And then they're going to tax you if you actually prevail over it all. So thank you for listening to me. And any questions you want?
Any questions?
Peter, absolutely fascinating subject, and what I would be interested in, because years ago I was in the public health engineering industry, and we installed digesters and produced methane, and we were doing that from domestic sewage. Are you involved in that in any of your processes, or you mentioned food waste being the main thing?
Yeah, it's food waste. We don't take sewage waste. Well, the sewage that's generated on the site we take, but we don't. To my mind, it's a different business, because the driver for the water companies is water, and the driver for us is energy. Now, I know they have a subsidiary driver of energy, but it's not the main driver. Also, fertilizer in our case, we're very careful. And if you take public sewer material, it has contents which we wouldn't really want. So it wouldn't be making such a good fertilizer. Our fertilizer is about 8,000 parts per million ammonia or nitrogen, a certain amount of phosphate and potash, and there's humus with it as well, of course. It's a different sort of commodity, and we wouldn't really want to get what's put down from chemical works into our digester, really. And of course, per unit that goes in, we generate a lot more electricity, I suspect.
Can I suggest you should have brought your grandson here to find out what you're good at?
Well, thank you very much. That's very flattering.
Can I just add, I travel in Japan and other places. It seems in Japan, fish farming is a big, particularly carp, because they grow quicker. Have you thought about fish farm or any other cash crop that can be used? Can be used to.
Have you heard the story of the barramundi? Oh, it's a fish that used to grow in Barra in Scotland, and they took it to Australia, and it grew big, and they brought it back to farm it in England. Do you believe that? It's a load of rubbish. Barramundi is actually a kind of fish that's grown in Australia. And we did look at fish farming, but we couldn't actually make money. But where we would, I think where we will, I'm looking in the north of Scotland where there's a lot of salmon and other fish grown. And there is a problem with the disposal of waste feces, basically, from the salmon farms. And I'm looking in the north of Scotland, maybe having an anaerobic digester on the site where we plan to make wood pellets, and then using the waste heat rather like the model at Holsworthy. So we're looking at it. But one of the troubles is that there's such a limited time. I work pretty... Job to know what I don't know. I mean, we're all the same probably. And when you have so many regulations to deal with, such complex legislation, it's very hard. You think you're progressing on the right way, we better just check what the legislation is with regards to that. You should be able to hold it all in your head, but I defy anyone to hold all the legislation, the basic legislation, in their heads. I don't think the boards of the vial companies really know the decisions they're taking. They must take it from advice because the complexity is too great. With what we need is simplicity. And simplicity will enable 1,000 different schemes. I'm just I'm nothing really. I just left school and did what I thought was obvious. There's 10,000 different schemes ready to go if we could get simplicity. Each of them in their own way. We've heard about one yesterday. Everyone has its place. What mustn't happen is that these civil servants pick winners, because every one winner they pick 10 losers. And it's wasting commodities, it's wasting a resource we can't afford to waste. We must have a totally level playing field. I don't want a special price. I argued for just one rock for everything. I argued very strongly. I resigned from the REA over it. I was chairman of their policy committee, and then it was taken a different way by the REA on banding of rocks. Banding of rocks means that you pick winners. And you can get 5 rocks for generating waves, and you get, I get nothing at all for the heat, if I use the heat that comes off the anaerobic digester that's going in the air. It's wrong. It should all be level, and then the best, the cheapest ones come forward first. And then the expensive ones get discarded. We can't afford. People have got to have jobs. They can only have jobs if we keep our costs down so that we can compete with the Far East and other places which are striving to improve their standards of living quite rightly. We must keep our own costs down. We can't do that by letting civil servants and government ministers pick winners. The civil servants are university idiots.
Can I just add to you, at the IEA was discussing about this implementation of how to encourage renewable, and one of the things that we were trying to persuade them that the regulations ought to be reduced. For instance, when we were doing the Eden project, the Planning Commission, they found one potential dormouse, and it took 9 months of stoppage and a huge sum and survey. It delayed us significantly. And the dormice are ran wild all over the place. It's not that it's particularly species that we should be concerned about. The rules and regulation, some of the easy rules are made for different countries, and I think maybe not relevant to other countries.
I couldn't agree more. Talk to me about newts. My God. And they are scarce. Newts are scarce in Europe. They're very common in this country. And yet they prevent a lot of things happening.
Thank you very much.